Hey, what's up guys? Welcome to MTXChess. My name's Nathan. Thanks for watching this video. Today we're talking about the King-Rook checkmate, one of the most important checkmates in chess. It's a little bit more complicated than the King-Queen checkmate, which is the last one we went over. So let's talk about this checkmate. We'll go through it and we'll go through why it's important. So to start out, why is this checkmate so important? Basically, because in chess, it's pretty common to get into rook-pawn endgames. Endgames where both sides have a rook and both sides may or may not have pawns. In this position, white has a pawn that's pretty close to queening. And let's say it's white to move, they move their king here. Pretty soon, the king's going to come to the b7 square and kick the rook off this a8 square, and white's going to queen. It's not uncommon in this kind of situation for black to just sacrifice their rook to take the pawn. White obviously is going to take back, and now we're in a situation where it's king-rook versus king. It's so important to understand how to checkmate in this kind of situation. And this checkmate's a little bit more complicated because we use a concept called Zugzwang or Zugzwang, which is a German word where you put your opponent in a position where no move is a good move. So we'll go through a little bit of why that's important. But before we get into how to checkmate from this position, let's try and visualize what checkmate would look like if we use just a king and a rook. To do that, I'll put the king up at the top of the board. I'll put the white king right across, and I'll put the white rook on a8. This is checkmate for the king and the rook. If we look here, the white king takes away these squares from the black king, and the white rook delivers check along the 8th rank. This black king is in checkmate. So how do we achieve this kind of position? Well, let's set up a random position like this. So notice from that position we just had, the black king was up against the side of the board. It's important that we push the black king towards the side of the board. If it was white to move, what we're going to do is restrict the king's movement with the rook. We're going to move to a square like this. Okay? Now the rook is making a wall here. Oops. Now the rook is making a wall here that the black king can't cross. Let's say it's black to move, and they move this way. We're going to chase them with our white king, keeping our white king on the other side of the rook wall. As the pieces move back and forth, our king is kind of edging around, pushing that black king around. If at any point the black king gives up space, we're going to move up with our rook and move that rook wall even closer to the edge of the board. Let's say the king moves here. So what we want to do is white, right? We want to move our king closer at this point. We don't want to do is move the king directly in front of the king, in front of black's king. Because if they move like this and we move like this, black could just move back over, and we're in this situation where we're just constantly moving back and forth with the king, not really making any progress. Instead, in this position right here, white wants to pick a side. Let's say the white king moved to this side. So now the white king is on the left side of the black king. If the black king moves to this square, now we've got this position where the white king and the black king are directly across from each other. The white king is making a wall, and it's white to move. So white can play this rook move, forcing the king off the 7th rank because these squares are covered. The black king has no choice but to move back to the 8th rank. So if you're white and this is the position and you've successfully pushed your opponent's king back to the 8th rank, what do you think the best move for you is? It's not f6, right? Because remember, if we move to f6, we're just going to be moving back and forth with the black king. We're going to be stuck in this kind of repetitive moving back and forth. Instead, if we set up the original position, a better move would be king e6. If we move king e6, now when the black king moves to e8, we'll be threatening checkmate with rook b8. Black has no choice but to run away from the king. But he's going to run out of board because we're going to keep chasing him until the black king is forced to move back across from the white king. And then checkmate. Again, the white rook checking along the 8th rank and the white king taking away these escape squares. All right, so if we go back out here and let's get into the open board here. So obviously in this position, it's white to move, check, and the king moves back, all right? Let's say we did move right across. We made the mistake, we're directly across from the king. And let's say the king moves here. Now, what do we do in this situation? Obviously, if we move our king to e5, like so, we're just gonna be moving back and forth, and that's not what we want. So when the black king moves over and it's white to move, this is what white employs something called a waiting move here. Basically, the black king's in a good position, and really in their best position, right? And so if we play a waiting move like rook a6, it doesn't really do anything, but it puts the ball back at black's court. Now the black king has to make a move. If he moves back to d7, we'll check along the 7th rank and push the king back to the 8th rank. If the black king moves to f7, we'll just continue chasing them with the white king. Eventually, the black king will run out of board and be either forced to come back to g7, at which point our rook will check along the 7th rank, pushing the black king back to the 8th rank, or the black king will be forced back to one of these squares on the 8th rank. Excuse me. Let's say the king moves here, white moves, they're going to check along the 7th rank here. Remember, the white king makes a wall, the black rook checks, and now the king is forced back to the 8th rank. Let's say the black king comes here, and let's say the white king comes down. Now let's play a little bit longer one. Obviously, the black king cannot come to this square because that would result in checkmate with rook a8. And so the black king is going to come all the way over, and what white's going to do is just keep chasing the king. Eventually, as this happens, the black king is going to get all the way over to the rook. And what white needs to do is move the rook all the way to the other end of the board, right? So you don't want your rook to get taken, so you just move it as far away as possible. Whenever the rook moves, this sets up an opportunity for black to play kind of a sneaky move where they move back towards your king. As white, you have to have your head in a swivel and be aware that if you continue chasing the king, chasing the black king, by moving king c6, the black king will bypass the white king and come back over here. That'll look like this. And now, the black king's not across from the white king, and you have to chase the king all over again. If we go back to this original position, it's white to move in this position. What should white do? A good move for white would be another waiting move. You want to keep your rook on the 7th rank to keep the black king pinned against the 8th rank. And the best move for white would be something like rook g7. Now it's black to move. If black moves to d8, we'll get checkmate with rook g8. So what black's forced to do is continue running away, and the white king will continue chasing until black is eventually forced back, checkmate. So that's the king rook checkmate right there. It's very important to understand, not only because this is a very common checkmate that you're going to see a lot especially when you start playing chess, but also because understanding how the rook and king coordinate together to take squares away from the black king is very important in chess. And it's a tool that you can use in your rook pawn endgames, and you'll see a lot of rook pawn endgames, especially as you improve. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments. Please like this video if you found it helpful. If you didn't, leave a comment and maybe give some feedback. I'm totally open to that. Please subscribe if you're new to the channel. We're super excited to have you. Thanks for watching. And then you can always hit me up on chess.com at MTXOfficial. Excited to play some of you. I know I've already played a couple games with a couple people. It's been a lot of fun. So thanks, and we'll see you next time.